Right now, there's a single narrow stretch of water that could shut down China's entire economy in weeks. Every oil tanker, every cargo ship, everything. And for decades, that choke point has been under the influence of the West. It's called the Malacca Strait. But in 2026, something changed. The ice melted. A hidden route opened at the top of the world. And now, China is quietly escaping the one trap that could have collapsed its entire economy.
And it's not happening where everyone is looking. It's happening here.
For decades, China's entire economic engine has depended on a single fragile lifeline, a narrow stretch of water just a few kilometers wide at its tightest point, the Malacca Strait. It may look insignificant on a map, but in reality, it's one of the most important arteries on Earth. Nearly 80% of China's imported oil passes through this corridor. The energy that powers its factories, fuels its cities, and sustains its growth, all squeezed through this one route. Every day, thousands of ships move through it. Oil tankers, container vessels, carriers loaded with the raw materials of the global economy. But here's the problem. This isn't just a trade route. It's a choke point. One disruption, whether from conflict, blockade, or even piracy, could bring this entire flow to a halt. And if that happens, the consequences wouldn't be gradual. They would be immediate. Within weeks, China's supply chains would begin to strain. Factories would slow, energy reserves would tighten, the world's second largest economy suddenly vulnerable. And this vulnerability isn't a secret. For years, strategists have referred to it as China's Malacca dilemma, a structural weakness built into the geography of global trade itself. Because this narrow passage doesn't exist in isolation, it sits within a region heavily influenced by powers aligned with the United States. Which means, in a worst-case scenario, control over this route could be used as leverage, not through invasion, but through restriction, a silent pressure point capable of reshaping the balance of power without a single shot being fired. And that's what makes it so dangerous, because for China, this isn't just a logistical issue, it's an existential risk. A single narrow corridor holding together the foundation of an entire economy. And for years, there was no easy way around it, no alternative route, no reliable escape, just a growing dependence on a path that could be closed at any moment. Until now. For years, there was no way around it. Every ship leaving Asia for Europe had to take the long road down through the Malacca Strait, across the Indian Ocean, through the Suez Canal, and into the Atlantic, a journey stretching over 20,000 kilometers, slow, expensive, and dangerously exposed. But in 2026, that route is no longer the only option, because far above the world's busiest shipping lanes, something has changed. The Arctic, once an impenetrable wall of ice, is opening, and cutting across it is a new path, the Northern Sea Route, a direct corridor along Russia's northern coastline, connecting Asia to Europe in a way that was once impossible. What used to be a frozen barrier is now becoming a highway, and the difference it makes is massive. Instead of a 21,000-kilometer journey through the south, ships can now travel roughly 13,000 kilometers across the north. That's a reduction of nearly 40%. But this isn't just about distance, it's about time. A typical cargo vessel can save up to 2 weeks on a single trip. 2 weeks less fuel, 2 weeks less exposure to risk, 2 weeks faster to market. And in global trade, time isn't just money, it's power. Because when goods move faster, supply chains tighten, prices shift, competition changes, entire industries feel the impact, from electronics to energy to manufacturing. The cost of moving an iPhone, a car battery, or a microchip across continents begins to change. Not dramatically at first, but enough to tilt the balance over time. And making this possible isn't just geography, it's technology. China has been investing heavily in a fleet of advanced icebreakers, ships designed to cut through thick Arctic ice and keep these routes open longer each year. At the same time, seasonal passages are becoming more predictable. Windows that once lasted weeks are now stretching into months, turning what was once a rare opportunity into a repeatable system, a system that can be scaled and controlled. Because this isn't just about using a new route, it's about building a new network. Ports, infrastructure, logistics chains designed around the Arctic itself, a parallel trade system running far from the traditional choke points of the South, and most importantly, far from the pressure of the Malacca Strait. For the first time in decades, China has something it never had before, an alternative. Not a perfect one, not a complete replacement, but a strategic escape route, one that reduces its dependence on a single vulnerable corridor and quietly reshapes the flow of global trade. Because once a shortcut like this exists, it doesn't just save time, it changes the rules of the game. But a shortcut like this doesn't exist in a vacuum, because the Arctic isn't empty. It belongs to someone, and that someone is Russia, the longest Arctic coastline on Earth, Thousands of kilometers of frozen territory, now turning into the most valuable real estate in global trade. And China knows one thing. You don't control this route without Russia. So instead of competing, they partnered. Quietly, strategically, and fast. China brings the money. Russia brings the geography. And together, they're building something new. A controlled corridor across the top of the world. Ports are being upgraded, shipping lanes mapped, infrastructure pushed deeper into the Arctic. But this isn't just about trade. It's about protection. Because Russia isn't just opening the Arctic, it's fortifying it. Old Soviet bases, once abandoned in the ice, are coming back to life. Airfields, radar systems, military outposts, rebuilt, reactivated, expanded. Not for show, but to control who moves through this new route and who doesn't. Think about that for a second. The same shortcut that frees China from the Malacca Strait now runs through territory guarded by Russian military power. A trade route, backed by force. And that changes everything. Because this isn't just a partnership. It's leverage. Over shipping, over access, over the future flow of global trade. And on the other side of the world, the West is watching this happen in real time. Because while NATO has dominated the Atlantic for decades, the Arctic was never the priority. Now suddenly, it is. A new line is forming across the top of the map, not drawn in ink, but in ice. A divide between two systems, two powers, two visions of control. Some are already calling it the ice curtain. And just like every divide before it, it doesn't stay quiet forever.
But the real battle for the Arctic isn't happening on the water. It's happening on land. Because beneath the ice and buried deep in the ground is something far more valuable than shipping routes. Resources. Rare earth minerals. The building blocks of the modern world. The same materials that power smartphones, electric cars, military systems, and advanced ships. And sitting on one of the largest untapped reserves of these materials is Greenland, a massive island in the North Atlantic, quietly becoming one of the most important pieces on the global chessboard. Because whoever controls these resources doesn't just influence trade, they influence the future of technology itself. And China understands this better than anyone. Over the past decade, it has moved aggressively to secure access to rare earth supply chains across the world. Not loudly, but consistently. Investments, infrastructure deals, mining interests, all aimed at one goal. Control the inputs, and you control the output. And Greenland fits perfectly into that strategy. A foothold in the high north, close to Arctic shipping routes, and rich in the materials that will define the next century. But here's where it gets complicated. Greenland isn't just land. It's tied to Europe, watched closely by the United States, and sitting right in the middle of a growing geopolitical tug-of-war. Because the moment China steps too far into the region, it's no longer just business. It becomes strategy, influence, power projection, and suddenly, a remote icy island becomes a global flashpoint. And there's an irony here that's hard to ignore, because the very thing making all of this possible is climate change. The melting ice, the opening routes, the exposed resources. What was once a global crisis is now being turned into a strategic advantage, a new kind of dividend. And that changes how nations think, not just about the Arctic, but about the future itself. Because this isn't just about China, or Russia, or the West. It's about a shift that's already happening, whether the world is ready or not. The map is being redrawn, quietly, but permanently. And the question isn't if this changes everything, it's who controls what comes next. So if you want to understand the hidden moves shaping the world before they hit the headlines, subscribe now, because the next shift is already underway.